everyone, welcome to the Empower Journal podcast and wishing you a very happy new year 2025. And guys, I'm so thrilled to kick off the year with a truly special episode. One that sets the tone for everything. In fact, this podcast is about empowerment, connection, and meaningful conversation. Starting a new year always feels like a blank slate for me, doesn't it for you? Because it's a perfect mix of excitement for what's ahead and little reflection on past to look behind. Once again, welcoming you to the episode 28 and the first episode of the new year. Today, we have the honor of speaking with someone really inspiring. To begin with, she is an award-winning filmmaker and the co-founder of Red Dot Foundation. Now, if you have been with us before, we often dive into insightful Q&A sessions usually. But today, we are doing something a little different. For this first episode of the year, we are going deeper, more personal, and more reflecting with an inspiring interview from Supreet. She's not someone who's just talking about the change. She's someone who's making a real difference, actively creating it, from working on issues of gender equality to building a safer communities. She's actually tackling challenges that, in fact, affect all of us in one way or other. Let's delve into her incredible journey, the impact of her work, and how we all can contribute to creating more safer spaces. So let's dive in. Hey Supreet, welcoming you to the very first episode of 2025, and let's start at the beginning. What inspired you to embark this path of activism and social impact? We would love to know more about your journey.
Thanks, Devki. It's great to be on this podcast, and it's inspiring that you have kind of also gone through a transition in your own journey and found this, which is very important and I think very relevant to the time. So thank you once again. So my name is Supreet. I started my journey. I was born in Bengal. I am from Kashmir. My father was in the army, so I traveled all over India. So living in different communities was something which was very normal for me. And we would shift every 2 to 3 years. So I think I have lived in at least 15 states of India. And I think that played an integral role in shaping me to be who I am today. I have graduated in commerce. I did my post-graduation in international finance and business. And then I took up a job with Kingfisher Beer. I was the first girl in liquor industry in India who was in a managerial post. A lot of people were looking at my career. I was on a fast-forward track. And I left my job and I started photography. I was always an artist. I was a storyteller. I started making short films. I started making ad films slowly. And then in 2012, when Nirbhaya happened, we all know about the gruesome gang rape of Jyoti Singh in Delhi in a public transport in a city which is most populated, right, in our country, which is the showcase market of our country. We all started sitting up and asking questions. But me and my friend Elsa, who I had met in Kingfisher Airlines, and we became really close, we started talking, and she had an idea about what can we do more than lighting candles and going into marches? And that's where really Safe City was born. And so the thought was that we build a platform where we can get people to come in and report any form of sexual violence that they face in public spaces. So we wanted to understand why was it that there were only 10% of cases being reported, while the rest of the 90% of the cases, nobody even knew about them. And we realized that the authorities don't have the data, evidence-based data, to actually take action on. And so we wanted to bridge the gap between what was the reality of sexual violence and what was actually being reported. Because if a problem is not reported, it's invisible. So how does somebody find a solution to something which is invisible? And that's where Safe City was born. So we wanted to bridge that gap because we believe that they are brilliant systems, but it's just that we don't have enough people and enough stakeholders taking part in it and investing in it. So Safe City started like that.
Now that we have learned about your journey, so let's talk a little more about Red Dot Foundation and how it is part of the society today. Because for our listeners, we understand what is the contribution of Safe City to the world. Can you tell us more about the mission of Red Dot Foundation? How did you leverage the technology, like especially for the Safe City platform, and especially to empower the communities?
So, like I said, Safe City was born when Nirbhaya happened, and we launched the platform on 26 December 2012. But Red Dot Foundation was registered a little later because we had to form a proper structure, and we needed to have an organization which was the umbrella organization under which Safe City came. So, Safe City became a web and a mobile platform where we invited people to report anonymously any form of sexual violence that they had ever faced, or if they had seen something around themselves. So it was anonymous because people don't want to give their identity, right? Now, as and when people...
Irrespective of timeline, people can report it at any point, is it?
Absolutely. We had a lady who was 69 and she came and reported something which had happened with her 50 years back.
Okay.
Right. So the idea behind this was that you understand what is it about the public spaces that makes it vulnerable for women and girls, and why do those areas become hotspots for perpetrators to sexually harass or violate women. So let me tell you how it happens. Safe City, we ask people to report what happened. So there are no names, there are no numbers that we take. There's no personal data we ask for. We ask for what happened, where it happened, and when it happened. So the date and time of that incident.
The time of the event. Okay.
Correct. So as and when people start reporting, you start seeing trends in different areas. For example, if you're in Koramangala, Devki, and I'm coming to meet you there for this podcast, I'm actually going to come and meet you. I can actually go on to the Safe City map and zoom into the street you're sitting in to see if our meeting is at 6 p.m. Was there anything reported around that time? And if I see 5 reports of groping or 3 reports of eve teasing, and that makes me uncomfortable, I can call you and say, Devki, can we meet somewhere else, or can we reschedule the timing to maybe a daytime when there are no reports there? Or maybe I will ask somebody to accompany me to meet you. So as an individual, Safe City is helping you be more situationally aware for your own safety, right?
It's about more feeling safe, actually, and you do it by yourself.
Yes.
It's quite inspiring, Supreet. But working on such, challenging issues can be really tough. How do you stay resilient and motivated? Because I understand it's a decade-old journey. But is there a moment or any story that deeply touched or which keeps you awake?
So, I don't know whether you know, but I'm a yoga acharya. I've been practicing yoga, meditation more than 15 years now. I've been teaching as well. So meditation is a very big part of my daily life. Also, what we did was initially when we started this journey, within the 5 years of starting this, of the first 3 years, I think, me and Elsa, we got certified as counselors. So we went through a process to be personal counselors and therapists, so that when we dealt with survivors, we knew how to deal with them. But before that, like you said, how do we safeguard ourselves from being emotionally affected by everything that we were talking about?
Exactly.
Because we are 24/7 talking about sexual violence, meeting survivors. So yes, so that, I think that kind of, so that was one thing we did to enforce, to create a kind of a guard for ourselves to help us in this journey, right? I came back and we had a workshop in a school, in a BMC school in Govandi in Mumbai, where we were supposed to train children on child sexual abuse. And I remember going in there, and there was this one girl who was totally quiet throughout that, throughout the 2 hours that I was speaking to them. And she kept on reminding me of something, and I couldn't point my finger at that. But after the class left, she stayed back with her friend, and I asked her to come to me, and she said, is it okay? Is it still wrong if your teacher does it to you? And I said, which teacher does what to you? And she told me how her teacher, who would probably she'll go to tuitions for after school, would make her sit on his lap and would would obviously do inappropriate things. And then I told her, can I speak to your parents? And she said, no, I'll. And, we spent an hour after that. And that's when I remembered my child sexual abuse as well. And I told her, why don't you go? Can I come and speak to your mom? She said, no, I will speak to her. Thank you, Didi. I can go and speak to her. The next day, I was taking a class in another group of children. And I was standing in the corridor of this BMC school. And I see this girl running from the other end of the corridor once she saw me. And she ran and she came and hugged me. And she said, I told my mother. And I said, so is she going to do something? She said, yeah. She said that, I don't have to worry and I can go with my sister. But I do need to still go back to the same guy to learn. And she told me not to tell the father because then there will be, there'll be some problem and people will fight.
Of course.
And that's when I felt happy for that one moment. And then I was like, oh my God, there's so much work to be done. The mother is sending the girl child back to that man. And with her elder sister time. There is so much of education and advocacy needed in this country. And there's so much of hand-holding that's needed so that every girl child is going to be safe. And that incident stays with me throughout and it keeps me awake in the night sometimes. What can I do to probably not have another girl ever face this again?
I think a lot of people listening to this will relate to what you just said because it's a universal challenge, I would say, for every girl outside there.
Now, I want to know, let's talk about how our listeners can get involved and make a difference. Because for those listening, what can individual do to contribute to creating safer spaces in their own community? What role, similarly, these organizations, businesses and government, can we amplify the impact of your mission?
Thanks, Devki. I think, and that's the most relevant question of the day because not one person can solve this problem. Every stakeholder has to buy in and chip in and do their bit, right? So while I told you how the app can be used by individuals for their safety, communities can use it. I can give you examples if you have the time.
Sure,
if you would like to know, yeah. So there was a particular community in Delhi where we noticed there were around 18, 19 cases of groping or some form of sexual harassment from a particular area. When we went there, it was one of those illegal communities, where people come in and make their houses, but they don't have any paperwork done. And there were 250 families living in that community, but they had one toilet amongst all of them. Okay. So as soon as you entered the community, the toilet was on the right-hand side and it had a huge gate. And right opposite that gate was a huge green sofa where there were men and boys sitting. So when we walked into the community, so that was the entrance of the community. And when we walked in, one of the boys who was probably 16 years old, 17 years old, he whistled at us. So, we just turned around and he said, we are going to your community hall to meet the women of your community. If you want to come and say something, why don't you come there? And he got very flabbergasted, a girl actually turning around and saying something to him. He was not used to that. He was not used to that. And so we went into the community hall. We had around 15, 20 girls and women. And we said, we've got this data. And one by one, everyone stood up and said, that community toilet is a problem because the boys have broken the windows. There are no latches on the door. Sometimes there are no bulbs also. So when we go into the toilet, we have to ensure somebody standing outside the door. And even then, some people have taken videos from the windows that they have broken. So it is unsafe. There was also a case of rape in that community toilet. So they said that, at the end of the day, we have to wait till it becomes night so that nobody can see us when we are inside doing a job, or we have to ensure we go in groups. So we keep on waiting throughout the day. Nobody goes there alone. None of the women would go alone. And we didn't realize, but that young boy was standing outside and listening. He was at the back. These were really small rooms. And so we asked these girls and women, what do you want to do? And they said, we would like to tell them this is not okay because now you're telling us it's a crime under the law. So we said, what can we do? So we ideated and we thought that the best way of dealing with it in this community, because it was a very close-knit community and everyone was related to somebody, was that we painted the walls of the community toilet. So these women decided, we taught them how to paint. We got an artist to teach them. They painted the wall. One girl actually drew visually what was happening with her. So as she was walking into the toilet, somebody pulled her dupatta and groped her. So she drew it on that wall. And then she wrote on top of that in Hindi, is this right? And then opposite to that wall, they put down all the Indian penal codes, which said what was the crime and what was the punishment. And we finished by the end of the day, and these boys were sitting on that sofa and watching. And when we went home, we were really worried what's going to happen because, like I said, close-knit community. All these men were related to all these women and girls. And when we came back the next day in the morning, to our surprise and relief, the green sofa had disappeared.
Okay.
And that young boy, 17-year-old boy, Manoj, he became an ambassador of safety in his community. Now he educates the women and men of his community on why it's important to educate the girls. He's also formed a football team of the girls in his community, and he goes and plays matches with boys from other communities with them.
Are there any ongoing campaigns or initiative where our listeners can participate in right now? Like, would you like to add a call to action for our listeners to engage with Red Dot Foundation?
Thanks, Devki. And like I mentioned earlier, I think this is very important for all stakeholders to realize what they can do. And everyone can actually make a difference. Like they say, if you want to see change, start with yourself, right? So in Chennai, we have been working with the Gender Lab. Which is part of the state government, where we have trained 100 community workers and 100 youth from 10 colleges on what is sexual violence, what is the redressal system, and how they can use Safe City to get those reports, and then we can use them with the police. So we are in the process of finalizing a project where we'll be training 20,000 people across Chennai on how to use Safe City and how they can be more situationally aware for their own safety as well. And they will become safety ambassadors who will further go into communities and societies, collect reports, educate them on what is sexual violence and what is the redressal system in the state. So that is some of the things that we are doing in Chennai to start with. I think there are lots that we'll be doing in Tamil Nadu overall as well. And I think I'll tell you more about it maybe in the next podcast we do. We'll have more clarity on how we are structuring our work in Tamil Nadu as such. But Chennai, like I told you, how people can be part of this is please download the Safe City app, use it. See how it works for you. Probably your friends, your sisters, your daughters, you yourself can also use Safe City app to ensure that when you are going into an area that is not known to you, you are at least aware of what surroundings are. Are they safe for you? Are they not? What is it that you can do to ensure your safety? That is, I think that is something. We also have a program called Bystander Intervention, where we educate people on how they can be active bystanders instead of just standing on the side and watching somebody being violated or, so much violence happening next to you. How you can take part by keeping yourself safe, So we do a program on the 5 Ds. And I would like people to probably go on our website and check that out because that can come very handy. Just be bold enough to speak up. Keep yourself safe, but speak up or go and report it if nothing else at some point when you are safe. But please take a stand. We all can bring about a change.
Thank you so much, Supreet, for joining us today and sharing your incredible insights and experiences. And that brings us to the end of this episode of the Empowered Journal podcast. A massive thank you to Supreet Singh for sharing her inspiring journey and the incredible work she's doing with Red Dot Foundation. Sometimes conversations like this that actually reminds us what's possible when passion meets purpose. And as we step into this new year, let's carry forward the ideas we talked about today, whether it's about thinking bigger or supporting each other, or just taking the first step toward change. Remember, no effort is too small when it comes to making the world a safer and a more inclusive place. So guys, if this episode resonated with you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And hey, don't forget to follow the podcast for more stories that empower and inspire. Thanks for kicking off 2025 with me. I can't wait to bring you more conversations like this. Until next time, this is Dev signing off. Take care, stay inspired, and keep making the difference. See you soon. Nandri.